Hello, I'm excited to share today a core introduction to the benefits of cold exposure and the different ways it can be done, from immersion, for example, in ice water, to cryotherapy, to cold showers. I'll divide it in three parts. The first thing is that now that it has become a bit more well known as a practice and almost a kind of therapy, one of the key reasons is that it has for a long time been known to help reduce inflammation. The response of the body to the cold means that there is a constriction of the blood vessels. The vasoconstriction is very important to keep the cardiovascular system healthy. There's pretty much no other way in which you can get a very big part of the body, as it happens when you immerse yourself in the cold, to access this very powerful anti-inflammatory vasoconstriction system. But there is an even a bigger set of benefits, because the cold is an opportunity to work with brown fat. And most of us are born with brown fat. As kids, we have a very high percentage of it, and because it doesn't get used, like anything that doesn't get used, as if we never exercised our muscles, it starts to basically disappear. And brown fat has several very key characteristics. One, unlike fat in other parts of the body, the brown fat, especially that develops here around the chest, and you can see it by the color, or for example behind your neck, is a certain kind of fat that, unlike most of the rest of the fat that's only, let's say, a passive storage of energy for future use, the brown fat has mitochondria. And the mitochondria, it allow us to have thermogenesis. It has the ability to create and use energy to create heat. So that gives us three very key advantages. One is it burns a lot more calories, because we renew our body's ability to create its own heat. Also, it resets an important part of our metabolism. That's why when people are also facing, for example, insulin resistance or other metabolic challenges, being able to have the brown fat activated starts transforming the metabolism, the ability of the body to also use fats and other energy sources. And it's why you can often see incredible success in terms of losing, for example, visceral body fat, when you're able to combine a very low carbohydrate diet with the exposure to the cold. And finally, the brown fat has important secondary benefits, because it helps regulate certain hormones. So things, for example, around the right thyroid and stuff, we're understanding that the brown fat is a very important part of keeping it working. The second one that I always like mentioning is the effect on the immune system. Some people are a little bit afraid that the cold can be a problem, and as long as you're in good health, and you don't have, for example, a problem with high blood pressure that's not controlled by medicaments, the immune system actually gets a boost, because the cold exposure, among other things, it activates norepinephrine, and this is a hormone that also works with several neurotransmitters to make our immune system much better at keeping us being cared for as it's meant to be. Because a lot of what we do in these kind of practices is what we've defined as hormesis, which is like the healthy stress. It is a stress to the body, but it's a stress with which the body becomes stronger. Then we see, I think, in the area that I have spent a lot of the last 2 years working on, which is the benefits of cold exposure for mental and mindset. And the benefits of cold exposure, I would say, I think one way I always like mentioning is that when you go into the cold plunge, you always get an initial shock, and a shock that activates both physical response. There's mammals, when they come into the cold, there's a cold shock protein that lost several arrangements of hormones, of noradrenaline or norepinephrine, of dopamine. But the most important thing is that each time we go into the cold, our bodies are 37 degrees centigrade always. So any water below 15, that shock means that we have a chance to face stress in its physical dimension very clearly. And for the first 90 seconds or so, we can train ourselves to become more resilient, to be able to use our breath and presence to remain calm in the face of this challenge that's often physical, but that then looks a lot like a lot of other mental challenges, because the response to the cold is very similar to the response to, for example, anxiety, which is an invitation to shallow breathing, a sense that we cannot take it at that moment. And yet, if we're able to stay present, to breathe slowly through it, we realize that we have an incredible mindset tool within us that makes us much more resilient for allowing our mind and body to regulate the physical or mental challenges that come throughout the day. And that brings me to the third set of benefits are around what we like to really help people develop, which is like a better sense of well-being and a more holistic sense of well-being. And what's interesting is that even though the few minutes you spend in the cold can at first feel a bit challenging, and for the first 90 seconds there's a bit of like the initial shock, afterwards you start to feel when the endorphins have come up and the noradrenaline, a very spacious kind of calm, because you're not receiving, for example, something that's numbing your ability to pay attention. Sadly, in modern society, we often feel like, oh, if we have stress or anxiety, I want to try to numb it or feel less. But in the cold, we have a different thing. It's like once we feel the initial adjustment of the body and hormonally, we have for the next few hours and even ongoing for 2 or 3 days, there's still the effects. But definitely for the first 3 or 4 hours, like it's just a very clear mental presence. And that, I think it's because with the serotonin, dopamine, and basically a lot of the mood stabilizing hormones, you don't just get like a quick benefit, but you actually get for the next few hours. And it's one of the things that in my own practice and in my own life I enjoy the most, which is an engaged and serene clarity. So in summary, from the benefits that you heard about the immune system, which they're correct, to the core benefits that you can get metabolically, I worked for the first 6 months of 2024 to get rid of almost 23, 24 pounds of unnecessary body fat I had acquired by being not so careful with my eating, as I was traveling a lot around conferences and events around the world, and had left a little bit my routine of exercise. And in that time I was able to not only lose only body fat at maybe 3, 4, 5 times as fast as before, but in a very healthy way, because I was not going in a way that would be missing any of the core nutrients. I was still having a very healthy diet. I was having a low carbohydrate diet, but I was doing almost daily cold immersion. I was doing the cold immersion like in a very well-designed protocol and supervised. And because of that, I was able to lose visceral fat, which is the really key thing I wanted to lose, while actually gaining a bit of muscle. I did not lose any muscle, which often happens to people who try to lose body fat very fast but don't have the proper serve protocols. And in the meantime, I was able to build back the mitochondria of my brown fat, which means I now have a much healthier basal metabolic rate, and I was able to reverse my initial kind of insulin resistance that could be happening. But the key thing that I saw was, I did not get a sick single time during those 6 months, and also I was very lucky to really have time and guidance to work on the mindset benefits. And I think the mindset benefits, because they last for several hours every day and often go across, gave me sort of a very stable set of habits that I could stack on top of the cold. So that's the thing that I will mention in a couple of practices, that if you're able to combine, for example, either cold showers or ideally sometimes cold immersion in ice water, with an exercise protocol that takes advantage of your body being pre-cooled, you're able, as I found, to extend 30 or 40% the ability to perform work and strength because of the body having been pre-cooled. And also, it's interesting that, for example, in males around 50, as we sometimes need to start looking at testosterone, the use of cold immersion followed by exercise is able to help boost also testosterone in many cases. And you can use it after intense exercise, and it will definitely have an effect in lowering inflammation, as you see Formula One drivers, for example, or soccer players, or many athletes. But if you use it combining protocols that are optimized for building muscle mass, then the pre-cooling is one of the things that we're starting to see from research that's most exciting. And finally, on the mindset, if you are able to combine a kind of meditation practice of any kind, so that when you go into the water, you go with an intention and with presence, and make it almost kind of like an intentional meditative mindset exercise, you realize that this is one of the things for mindset that can really take you further along whatever practice of meditation you do. So I look forward to sharing in a couple of future videos different practices so you can start doing it, for example with cold showers or just cold exposure, to then deepening with these intentional and well-designed immersions with ice water, and then finally find ways in which this, for example, complements things like sauna and the benefits that you get from the contrast therapy. So we're very excited that this is really a field that we now have both a lot more knowledge and practice, but it's beyond the fad, and we do have a lot of benefits that come scientifically proven, and that we can start using our own intuition so that we can combine it with our other practices. Thank you very much.